If you are currently receiving Social Security SSI or SSDI payments, pause whatever you are doing right now because Congress has just passed a new law that directly affects your monthly benefit payments. And the vast majority of people have absolutely no idea that this is happening. Believe me when I say I fully understand how exhausting and overwhelming it can feel trying to keep up with all of these government changes, especially when media coverage makes everything sound unnecessarily complicated and confusing. That is precisely the reason these videos exist, to take all of that complexity and translate it into plain, clear, everyday language that actually makes sense to real people. This new law is affecting millions of seniors and disabled Americans at this very moment. We are talking about payment amounts, eligibility requirements, and yes, the very real question of whether a new stimulus payment could be making its way to eligible recipients. These are genuine and significant changes that could mean additional money coming into your household, or fewer dollars if you are not properly informed and prepared. By the time you finish watching this, you will know exactly what has changed, what it means for your specific benefit check, and what steps you may need to take in order to protect your financial security going forward. But before we dive in, if this kind of straightforward and honest information is helpful to you or to someone you care about, take just 1 second and give this video a thumbs up right now, because that small action helps this content reach more seniors who genuinely need to hear it. All right, let us get into what is actually going on. Here is where we need to begin, because before we walk through the specifics of this new law, there is something genuinely important that I want you to understand, something that does not get talked about enough or given the attention it deserves. Congress does not pass legislation about Social Security very frequently. In fact, meaningful and substantive changes to the Social Security system tend to happen maybe once every several years at most. So when a new law does successfully pass and actually changes how your payments function, that is a significant event. That is not something you brush aside or scroll past. That is exactly why we are here having this conversation today. I also want to be completely transparent with you about something else. There is a considerable amount of misinformation circulating online right now about this particular law. Some people are dramatically overstating what it does, others are dismissing it as less important than it actually is. And some of what is being said is simply factually incorrect. So what we are going to do today is walk you through precisely what this law contains, what it genuinely changes, and what those changes mean for actual people in the real world. People like you, your husband or wife, your neighbor down the street, your brother or sister who might be receiving SSI or SSDI right now, we are going to move through this carefully, clearly, and with complete honesty. No exaggeration, no political spin, just the straightforward facts you need in order to make informed decisions about your benefits. So let us begin at the very foundation. The law that Congress has just passed is formally titled the Social Security Fairness Act. Now, that name might ring a bell for some of you, and there is a very understandable reason for that. This piece of legislation has actually been in development and under advocacy for multiple decades. That is correct. Advocates, seniors, retirees, and disability rights organizations have been pushing relentlessly for this exact change for more than 40 years. And finally, at the very end of last year, that effort reached its conclusion. The president signed the legislation into law, and it is now officially on the books. So what was the underlying problem that this law was designed to correct? In order to understand that, we need to go back and discuss two specific provisions that had been embedded in Social Security law since the 1980s. They were known as the Windfall Elimination Provision, frequently abbreviated as WEP, and the Government Pension Offset, commonly referred to as GPO. I recognize that those labels sound like dense technical language, and honestly they are, but stay with me here because this is the part where the real conversation about money begins and where it becomes directly relevant to your situation. The Windfall Elimination Provision was a rule that reduced Social Security, retirement, or disability benefits for workers who also happened to receive a pension from employment that did not contribute to Social Security through payroll taxes. Think about the kinds of workers this affected. Teachers, firefighters, police officers, postal workers, and a wide range of other public sector employees. In many states across the country, these workers contributed to a separate government-managed pension system rather than paying into Social Security. So when the time came for them to retire and collect both their pension and the Social Security benefits they had also legitimately earned through other employment over the years, the WEP stepped in and reduced their Social Security check, sometimes cutting it by hundreds of dollars every single month. Now for a senior living on a fixed income with limited flexibility, losing $200 or $300 a month is not merely an inconvenience. It can mean being forced to choose between buying food and purchasing necessary medications. It can mean sitting in a cold house during winter because turning the heat on is not financially possible. It can mean carrying enormous financial anxiety and stress during what should genuinely be the most peaceful and comfortable years of your life. And for a very long time, millions of Americans simply accepted this reality because they did not know there was any alternative available to them. They told themselves, this is just the rule. This is simply how the system works. But the truth that advocates argued consistently for years is that this rule was profoundly and fundamentally unfair to the people it penalized. Then there was the government pension offset, which many would argue caused even greater pain for one particular group of people, surviving spouses. The GPO reduced Social Security spousal and survivor benefits for individuals who also received government pensions of their own. Picture this scenario to understand the real human cost. A woman dedicates 30 years of her professional life to teaching in a public school. Her husband spends his career working in the private sector and pays into Social Security throughout his entire working life. He passes away. She goes to file a claim for her survivor benefit, the benefit that exists specifically to provide financial support to widows and widowers following the loss of a spouse. And the GPO steps in and reduces that benefit, in some cases eliminating it in its entirety. That woman worked her entire adult life. Her husband worked his entire adult life. And yet she ends up receiving almost nothing from Social Security because of a rule that most Americans were not even aware existed. That is the reality that millions of people lived with for decade after decade. And now, at long last, it is changing. So here is the part you have been waiting to hear. What does the Social Security Fairness Act actually do in practical terms? In the most direct and straightforward language possible, it eliminates both the WEP and the GPO entirely and permanently. Both of them are gone. If you were affected by either of these two provisions during your time receiving benefits, your monthly payment is going to increase. Now let us put some real numbers on what that means, because this is the part that becomes genuinely significant for a great many people. For those who were impacted by the windfall elimination provision, the average projected increase to their monthly Social Security benefit is approximately $360 per month. That works out to more than $4,000 annually flowing back into the hands of hardworking Americans who, if we are being completely honest, had money that they had already rightfully earned taken away from them through the application of an unfair rule. For those who were affected by the government pension offset, and particularly for surviving spouses who bore the brunt of that provision, the increases can be even more substantial. Some widows and widowers who were receiving little or virtually nothing in survivor benefits as a result of the GPO could now find themselves entitled to receive their full spousal or survivor benefit amount. For certain individuals, that represents hundreds of dollars per month being added back into their monthly income. For others, particularly those whose benefits were completely eliminated by the GPO, the impact of this change is nothing short of life-changing. I use that phrase deliberately and with complete sincerity, genuinely life-changing for real people. And there is something else that carries tremendous importance and that you absolutely need to hear. This does not only affect payments going forward from this point. The Social Security Administration has confirmed that they will be issuing retroactive benefit payments going back to the month in which this law was officially enacted. What that means for you is that if you are among those who were affected by either WEP or GPO, you may be owed back pay, money that should have been coming to you previously, but was not. The Social Security Administration is currently working through the affected accounts and has stated that they anticipate beginning to process the increased monthly payments and retroactive amounts over the coming months as their review progresses. Now, I want to be precise here because this is an area where a significant amount of confusion tends to arise. Not every person who receives Social Security, SSI, or SSDI is affected by this law in the same manner or to the same degree. So let us be very clear and specific about who this legislation is genuinely directed toward and who stands to benefit most directly from it. If your entire working career was spent in jobs that paid into Social Security through payroll taxes, such as a standard private sector position, a business you operated yourself, or freelance and self-employment work on which you paid self-employment taxes, and you have never at any point received a separate government-managed pension, then the WEP and GPO very likely never applied to your situation to begin with. That means your benefit was not being reduced by these provisions. And as a result, the elimination of these provisions will not change your monthly payment amount going forward. However, and this is a critically important distinction that deserves emphasis, if you are a retired teacher, a former firefighter or police officer, a federal government employee who was hired before 1984, a state or local government worker employed in a state where public employees did not contribute to Social Security through payroll taxes, or the surviving spouse of someone who fits any of those descriptions, then you need to pay very close and careful attention to what follows. You are almost certainly among the nearly 3 million Americans who are directly and meaningfully impacted by this legislation. 3 million people. That is an extraordinarily large number, and a significant portion of them have been waiting for precisely this moment throughout the entire duration of their retirement. For those of you who receive SSI, which stands for Supplemental Security Income, the situation operates somewhat differently. SSI is a needs-based assistance program, meaning it is specifically structured for individuals with very limited income and minimal financial resources. The changes related to WEP and GPO do not apply to SSI in the same direct way that they affect Social Security Retirement Benefits or SSDI. However, that does not mean that SSI recipients are entirely unaffected by the legislative activity currently taking place in Congress. There are broader and ongoing conversations happening about SSI eligibility criteria, asset limit thresholds, and payment structures that could have real implications for recipients. We will address those discussions a bit further along in this video. For those of you who receive SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Insurance, here is what you need to understand about how this law applies to your situation. SSDI benefits are calculated based on your personal work history and earnings record, just as Social Security retirement benefits are. This means that if you were a public sector worker who became disabled prior to reaching retirement age, and your benefit was being reduced by the WEP as a result of your government pension, this law applies directly to you as well. Your monthly benefit amount could increase as a result of this change. Now, there is an additional development occurring around SSDI that merits honest and straightforward attention. And I want to address it directly because there has been considerable noise and confusion surrounding it online. There are proposals currently being discussed in Washington relating to the methodology used to evaluate SSDI recipients for continued eligibility. These conversations are not entirely new, but they are occurring with noticeably greater intensity and focus at this particular moment. Certain proposals under discussion would increase the frequency of what are formally called continuing disability reviews, abbreviated as CDRs, which are the periodic evaluations conducted by the Social Security Administration to confirm that a recipient continues to meet the established medical criteria for disability benefit eligibility. I want to be careful not to create unnecessary alarm here, because the reality is that the vast majority of SSDI recipients who have a legitimate and properly documented disability are not going to lose their benefits as a result of a routine review. The system, while imperfect in various respects, does include an established appeals process, and recipients have clearly defined legal rights throughout that process. What I do strongly encourage you to do, however, is make certain that your medical records are current and complete, that you are maintaining regular communication with your treating physicians, and that if you ever receive any correspondence from the Social Security Administration regarding a scheduled review, you treat it with the seriousness it deserves and respond to it promptly and thoroughly. Never ignore paperwork that arrives from Social Security under any circumstances. That is one of the single most important pieces of practical guidance I can offer to anyone watching this. I am fully aware that many of you clicked on this video at least in part because you saw a reference to a stimulus check, and I want to address that subject directly and with the honesty you deserve, because that is the only way I am willing to engage with you on something this important. As of right now, there is no new federally approved stimulus check that has been signed into law and designated for distribution in 2024 or 2025. I am aware that certain content creators are using that concept as a hook to attract views, and I have no interest in doing that to you. What does exist, however, is a set of ongoing and active discussions within Congress about providing additional financial relief specifically targeted at low-income seniors, SSI recipients, and individuals with disabilities. Multiple proposals have been formally introduced that would deliver either one-time payments or recurring financial assistance to benefit recipients who are struggling with the relentlessly rising costs of everyday necessities, including groceries, housing, utilities, and prescription medications, all of which have become dramatically more expensive over the past several years. Whether any of those proposals ultimately advances to the point of becoming law depends significantly on how the political landscape evolves over the coming months, and we will keep you updated on every meaningful development as soon as there is concrete and verified information to share. What can be confirmed right now is that the Social Security cost of living adjustment that took effect at the beginning of this year did result in a modest increase to monthly benefit payments. For the average Social Security recipient, that adjustment translated to approximately $50 additional per month. It is not a transformative amount by any measure, but it does represent something tangible, and it does help to partially offset some of the inflation burden that seniors across the country have been carrying. Now that you have a solid understanding of what this law does and which individuals it directly affects, let us shift our focus to the practical steps you should actually take in response to this information, because awareness alone is not sufficient unless it is paired with action. The very first thing I want you to do, and this applies especially to retired public employees and surviving spouses of public employees, is to either create or log in to your existing My Social Security account through the official Social Security Administration website at ssa.gov. This service is provided completely free of charge. Once you have logged in, you will be able to review your complete payment history, see your current benefit amount on record, and access any official correspondence that the SSA has sent to you. This is the only genuinely reliable source for accurate and current information about your specific benefit situation. Not a post on social media, not a comment section on a video platform, but the official records maintained directly by the Social Security Administration. The second step I want you to take is to practice patience while simultaneously remaining proactive and engaged. The Social Security Administration is currently managing an enormous volume of account changes as a direct result of this legislation. They have communicated that the complete processing of all affected accounts and the issuance of all corresponding retroactive payments could require 12 months or possibly longer to fully complete. That timeline is frustrating, and I genuinely understand why it would be, but the increased payments and the retroactive amounts are coming. If you believe you were impacted by either WEP or GPO and you have not seen any change reflected in your benefit amount by the middle of the year, do not simply assume that you were not affected and move on. Contact the Social Security Administration directly by calling their main line at 1-800-772-1213 or visit your nearest local SSA office in person and ask them specifically and directly about the status of your account and whether it has been identified as affected by this legislation. The third step, and this one carries special importance for those of you who help elderly parents, grandparents, or other family members manage their benefit-related affairs, is to be actively vigilant about scammers. Without exception, every time significant news emerges about Social Security changes, individuals with fraudulent intentions mobilize to take advantage of the resulting confusion and uncertainty. They make phone calls, they send emails, they have even been known to appear at people's front doors. They present themselves as representatives of the Social Security Administration and attempt to obtain your Social Security number, your bank account details, or request a processing fee that they claim will accelerate the delivery of your increased payments or retroactive funds. Let me be absolutely and unambiguously clear about this. The Social Security Administration will never initiate an unsolicited phone call to you requesting your personal information. They will never ask you to pay any kind of fee for any reason whatsoever. If any individual contacts you claiming to represent the SSA and makes any such request, end that call immediately without providing any information. I want to take a brief step back from the technical and procedural details for a moment because I genuinely believe this story means something considerably larger and more profound than the numbers reflected on a monthly payment statement. The passage of the Social Security Fairness Act is, in a very meaningful sense, a testament to what becomes possible when ordinary, everyday Americans make a collective decision to refuse to stop fighting for what is right and just. Teachers who devoted 30 years of their professional lives to educating the next generation of citizens. Firefighters who ran directly toward danger without hesitation so that the rest of us could run in the opposite direction to safety. Police officers, nurses employed by municipal hospitals, government clerks, public librarians. All of these individuals were quietly and consistently penalized for decade after decade by rules that the vast majority of Americans never even knew existed. And the people who led the charge to change those rules were not high-paid lobbyists or corporate attorneys with offices in Washington. They were retirees who sat down at kitchen tables and wrote letters to their representatives. They were widows who traveled to Capitol Hill and testified before congressional committees about the hardship these rules had created in their lives. They were advocacy organizations that scraped together modest donations year after year, decade after decade, just to keep the fight alive and moving forward. And that sustained and determined effort is ultimately what produced this result. That deserves to be recognized and honored, because it is easy to arrive at the conclusion that ordinary people no longer have any meaningful power in this country. But this law and this moment stand as concrete proof that persistence and determination absolutely still matter. For seniors living in America today, financial security is not an indulgence or a luxury. It is not something that requires justification or that should come with any sense of embarrassment. You worked throughout your adult life. You contributed to the system. You paid your taxes, you raised your families, and you invested yourself in building your communities. You earned these benefits through your labor and your contributions, and you deserve to receive them in their entirety, delivered fairly and without unnecessary reductions or complications. So here is where things currently stand. Congress has passed the Social Security Fairness Act. It permanently eliminates both the WEP and the GPO, two provisions that unfairly and unjustly reduce the benefits of millions of public servants and the surviving spouses of those workers. It has the potential to mean hundreds of additional dollars per month for affected recipients, along with retroactive back pay covering the period since the law was enacted. The Social Security Administration is actively in the process of updating the affected accounts as we speak. And while a new stimulus check has not yet been officially confirmed or approved, there are serious and substantive conversations underway in Washington that we will continue to track and report on with complete transparency. You now carry more understanding of this law than the overwhelming majority of people in this country. You understand what it does, who it affects directly, what warning signs to watch for, and what concrete actions you should take going forward. And that knowledge, that informed awareness, is power in the most practical and meaningful sense of the word, and it is exactly what you deserve to have.